Today, we're going to be talking about how property can help you sack the boss, essentially. It's about creating a transition plan calmly now on your terms that allows you to foresee how your life will be and make sure that you've got the plans in place. Your career, your business is going to be taking your time, and that's how you're earning good money. And so property, especially as an asset class that you can invest in, can offer you the opportunity to grow a business that generates a steady second source of monthly cash flow. There are changes coming, and you need to get yourself into a point where you are knowledgeable about your personal finances, so you understand your position and you're knowledgeable about the options that you have going forward. So let's just start off with reminding you about this freedom number. The question here is, how much is enough to cover your bills on a monthly basis? What you need to do here, and here we go. Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life with me, Vicki Wusche. Today we're going to be talking about how property can help you sack the boss, essentially. It's part of a whole course and a whole piece of thinking I've been doing around this idea of escaping the 9 to 5. It's not about a hard cut and a hard retirement that is at some point distant in the future. It's about creating a transition plan calmly now, on your terms now, that allows you to foresee how your life will be and make sure that you've got the plans in place. So I briefly mentioned that I have released a video on YouTube called Escape the 9 to 5. And what I want to do here is, in this podcast, is sort of share an overview or the essence of the content, so that especially if you're time poor, maybe not quite satisfied with your work life, the career that you're living, it's good, but it's not amazing. I can give you the essence of it, and you can decide whether this is something that you want to invest 2 hours of your time in, or whether you want to shortcut that and just book a call and let's see how I can help you. The thing is that if you are earning well, the chances are you're going to be time poor, because your career, your business is going to be taking your time, and that's how you're earning good money. I think actually that might just apply to anybody with a job these days. And so property, especially as an asset class that you can invest in, and especially family buy-to-lets, which is what I specialize in, can offer you the opportunity to grow a business that generates a steady second source of monthly cash flow. That if you combine that with simple management, and of course, the long-term ability to grow this into a full second business, but you can do all of this while still holding down your current job, because it is not hugely time demanding, especially if I'm helping you, then this is a way where you can start to building some of that financial resilience. You can have both your career as you've got it now, but the knowledge that there is other income coming in that is not tied to you going to work on a 9 to 5 basis. Although I think probably some of you would be happy if it was just 9 to 5. It's probably more like 8 to 6 or 7 till 7 or weekends as well. So in this podcast, I want to help you understand that this is not about waiting until you're exhausted or even ousted into retirement. It's about how you can start today transitioning on your own terms to your own timescale. And of course, the financial plan that will support that. We're going to make sure that you've understood, and I've covered this on previous podcasts, something that I'm calling now your freedom number. Whether it's enough money to cover your basic bills, whether it's more than enough, which is enough to cover your life as it is now, or much more than enough to cover whatever it is that you dream of to spend your wealthy life doing. It's about your investment strategy and creating a practical transition plan so that you can start to see how you can replace your salary with asset income that means that you are leveraging your time and your money. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about breaking that link between being salary dependent, which if you're an employee, you are salary dependent, to maybe boss optional, whether you do want to stay employed or not. And let's look at this all in an overview. So I think the thing about jobs is they feel safe right up until that minute when they're not, either because the company restructures or, as I've already said, because maybe AI comes along and reorganizes things for you. And if you just think we are only at the end of the first half of the 2020s, and we've had a pandemic, we've had Brexit, we've had wars, we've now got the coming AI revolution. And at the point that I am recording this, just yesterday or the day before, Amazon announced 14,000 job losses due to AI. And that's before we start knocking out all the drivers because the drones will be dropping your parcels off. There are changes coming, and you need to get yourself into a point where you are knowledgeable about your personal finances, so you understand your position and you're knowledgeable about the options that you have going forward. As part of the course that is on YouTube, I've got something called a React model, and I'll put that image in here for you. So React is all about reevaluating where you are now, knowing that there are changes to come. And that's what I want for you. I want you to be aware of the fact that changes are coming. For some of you, they're not going to affect you for 10 years, maybe. But for others, it could be next year that you start to see these changes affecting you. So reevaluate your personal financial situation. And then what I want you to do is I want to explore what are the options for you to be able to make your money work harder. You can look at all sorts of things from shares. So let's look at shares in two ways. You've got share trading, which is actually going to require a lot of education. It's about understanding company performance and picking the right shares and being able to trade those more on a daily basis. So it's more time intensive. Then there's just investing in shares. So a lot of people are doing that, putting their money into the stock market. Again, that's okay, but we've also seen the ups and downs. So you've got to understand how it works. You've got to understand that you're in it for the long term. And of course, you've got things like crypto and other asset classes that you can move into, gold and silver, etc. But the problem with all of those is that the bank will not give you a loan to invest in shares, crypto, obviously, gold, silver, etc. Whereas because a property is an actual asset, a physical thing that we can touch, an entity, they are prepared to lend against that. So you can leverage your money. Instead of having to put 100% of your money into the asset, you're effectively only putting 25% of your money in, plus, of course, all the buying costs and the overheads, but you'll have those with any asset class. So I want you to explore what your opportunities are. And then to almost close down the noise of whatever anybody else is doing and identify the specific investment techniques that match the lifestyle that you have now, how busy you are, the lifestyle that you want, and of course, your risk tolerance. Every asset that you go in has got the opportunity to go up, but also to go down, and you need to understand your risk profile. And out of that, to quite quickly make an informed decision as to what you want to do. And of course, I am, as I've declared my bias before, very pro simple family buy-to-lets. One, because if you get the right family that has been properly referenced, they stay in the property and they make it their home. It makes it easier to manage. It avoids losing money through voids and tenant turnover. So that's my preference, and that's what I do to help my clients. And then once you've got that portfolio and you're in a position where in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, you can reflect on where you are, the income you've got coming in, you might want to make different decisions, and you might then choose another asset class. You could leverage the rental income that you have from your property portfolio into shares or crypto or anything else that you want. But it's about making that choice, that decision to start today. And then, of course, actually what the video goes on to do is to actually help you turn that theory into action, to implement what you've learned. So whether that's about learning, mentoring, which is something that I can help you with, or engaging me, leveraging my time to support you into investing in property, that's what's key next. So the whole course goes all the way through this React model, and I'm just going to take you through, if you like, some of the key highlights of it. So let's just start off with reminding you about this freedom number. The question here is, how much is enough to cover your bills on a monthly basis? And then you can go on to have more than enough to cover your way of life. What you need to do here, and here we go, so early on I'm mentioning the spreadsheet, you need to understand what your income and your outgoings are. And once you understand how much money you need on a monthly basis, just to cover the basics, you've got your first level goal. Sometimes I speak to people and they want to earn 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 from property, maybe because they've seen some of the marketing that other people do, earn £20,000 in a year from investing in property. It's all well and good, but depending on where you are in your position and what cash flow or cash that you've got to invest, it might be quite hard to imagine the journey up to 20,000. But if I said to you, for example, your mortgage, your utility bills, etc., were just £2,000, or your mortgage might not be just £1,000, or maybe you've been paying it down and you've only got £500, or maybe your utility bills are only £300, to pick one of those numbers and start focusing on how you could replace just that one bill. And from one bill to two bills to eventually covering your monthly basic costs to have enough so that you could pay the bills from a second source of income and not have to go to work just to cover the bills, is quite a liberating, quite a euphoric moment to know that you're in that position. And from that, you can then start to make the plans to create more than enough money. And how can you do this? So I have mentioned buy-to-lets, particularly for family. Why? Because they are simple, they are steady, they are endlessly lettable. They are often in areas where these families have other family members. So I looked at a property last week where we were speaking to one tenant and her mum and dad live opposite. We rented a property to a young lad and his girlfriend, and his mum and dad lived opposite. Auntie often lives down the road. So people, particularly in the areas that I invest in, tend to stay a bit more connected to their families, which is sort of almost like old fashioned. We've forgotten that in the city centres. And so what you have is people who want to stay in the area, which means fewer voids. If you don't have a void, you don't have that loss of rent. And if you don't have a void, you don't have those tenant turnover costs, which might mean a light refurb on a property, certainly carrying out all the new marketing that's required for a tenant and all the tenant checks that need to go on. And that makes for simpler, easier management. Now, if we've got easier management, then you're in a position where not only are we making the best use of your money, but we're making the best use of your time. The next thing that you're going to want to think about, particularly if you're thinking about investing in property, is area. And everybody's going to want to think about area. They're going to want to think about whether they near or far, what property types. And quite frankly, as long as you're avoiding flats, as long as you're avoiding flats and focused on freehold, that's the goal. But actually, for me, the most important thing is the minimum target rent and the return on your investment. So in a little house that's, let's say, in the region of 120 to 140,000, I wouldn't want to have any less than 300 a month coming in. I'll have invested an amount of cash that means that I will get a net 7% return on my investment. And that's my baseline. I want to do better than that, but that's my baseline. So that actually drives me rather than the specific area. If I can find that, then I can start narrowing down the area, narrowing down the postcode, and then narrowing down the properties and narrowing down the tenant type. So it's sort of the order that you look for things. And of course, here, it all depends on what financial resources that you can leverage and how you can replace those financial resources. How quickly can you build your kitty back up again? And of course, the base rule here is never leave yourself short. Always have contingencies in your personal cash and contingencies in your property business portfolio and bank account. And of course, that all comes back to the pots that I talked about in the Smart Woman's Ultimate Guide to Money and Investing. It's about making sure that you have that 6 months resilience fund in your personal life, but also a good couple of grand sitting in the business, just sitting there at the bottom, not being touched, and the rent just piles on the top. And of course, if you're going to invest in property somewhere along the line, you do need to be thinking about exit strategies. And this is really about business review more than anything, to review your business on an annual basis, then every 3 years and every 5 years. And the reason for 5 years is typically you're taking out a 5-year mortgage. So the key action point here is to identify a personal investment strategy that works for you, that leverages both your time and your money effectively. And then you've got to think to yourself, what help do you need? Do I want to have a mentor that teaches me how and works alongside me? Or do I want to use someone like Vicki as a sourcer? In fact, there is no one like me, because the sourcing that I do, you are leveraging my time, but you will be getting the mentoring. Because unlike most people, when I find properties for my clients, I am working with them to create that business up front, to have the strategy, to have the business systems in place, to make sure that you've got the letting teams, the accountant, the insurers, the build team, refurb team, but also to then go on and have regular reviews with you to make sure that you understand how to manage the property, but also how to grow this portfolio business into something that will ultimately be able to replace your wages. So there's quite a bit here, just really right at the very beginning. How much money do you need to cover your enough? What are you going to focus on? And for me, it's always going to be those buy-to-let families. And then where? Are you going to, with the help of a mentor, look to do this locally to you? Or are you going to leverage my sourcing services, for example, so that we can focus on an area that provides those target goals, a minimum of 7 to 8% return, net return on your cash invested, so that it's got to be a better return than if you just left the money sitting in the bank. So I think the goal for you here, this is all part of reevaluating where you are with a few of the other bits thrown in. So looking at your exploring your options and looking at what approach, but mostly reevaluating where you are now. Think about whether you want to book a complimentary half-hour strategy session. If you look at the YouTube course and you go through those 2 hours, one of the things that I ask you to do there is to take the audit, the Readiness to Retire Wealthy audit, because that will give you some sort of benchmark and highlight actions that you need to take. And then, of course, we can book that call and start looking at what are your options to move forward. Before we get into that too much, what I want to do is talk to you about leveraging your time and your money, and in a sense, learning while you earn, not quitting the job, In fact, please don't quit your job, because you are more mortgageable if you stay employed. What I want to do is to get you to, as part of that reevaluation, to think through, what do I need to learn? What questions do I need to ask? And that, in a sense, is the whole point of the video, is to actually get you to understand the broad overview so that you can ask better questions. But what I want to do now is to just talk very specifically about money leverage and time leverage. What do I mean by that? Leveraging your money and leveraging your time. So the way that you lever your money is through a mortgage. So a sensible loan to value on a buy-to-let investment property is normally 75% loan to value. So that means that if a property was on the market for £100,000, subject to survey and your credit references and everything else, a bank would lend you £75,000 and you would put down a £25,000 deposit. You're still going to have stamp duty, you're going to have solicitors and survey fees, there's going to be maybe some refurbishment work that needs to be done to the property. So there'll be more than 25,000 that is required, but that's just an example at £100,000 purchase price. That gives you a broad idea that if you had £100,000, instead of buying one house outright, you're able to now buy 4. Now, yes, you are going to pay a mortgage payment on a monthly basis, the mortgage repayment to repay the mortgage costs. But actually, when you take the rent and you deduct the cost of the mortgage and, of course, the letting agent fees, then you're going to be in a position where 4 rental incomes minus the mortgage is more money than the one rental income from one property from a fully cashed asset. So that's quite hard to get your head round. But if you buy 4 properties and you pay the mortgages on them, the net cash flow that you get back is often much more than if you just bought one house outright for cash and didn't have a mortgage on it at all. And that's what leverage does. And quite frankly, if that doesn't work out as a piece of maths, then it's the wrong property or you're not leveraging it correctly. And one of the big mistakes, or really maybe one of the sort of the novice questions that I get, is this idea of investing in property, but treating it the same way you would your own residential. So taking a capital and repayment mortgage out. So a capital and repayment mortgage means, as we do on most of our homes, that what you're doing is you're borrowing some money and they're going to charge you interest. And as you pay your monthly payments, you are paying down some of the capital debt, the money that you borrowed, the loan, and the interest that you paid on that loan. And it's sort of like an inverted spreadsheet, it's an inverted graph, because at the very beginning you've got a very high loan and you're paying off very little in that monthly payment. Very little percentage is going towards paying down the loan, but eventually over time those little payments start to make a difference and you turn a corner. And what you're mostly doing right at the beginning of a brand new residential mortgage is paying the bulk of your mortgage payment is towards the interest cost. And at some point the loan reduces, the interest reduces, and you reach that point where towards the end of the loan, not halfway through, but more like 75% of the way through, you're actually paying more of your monthly payment goes towards paying down the capital and less of it is going to pay the interest because there is less loan as you've worked that way down. And the goal for that is because you want to end up in this house that you own mortgage free as part of your retirement plan. And that's what we've done for years and years and years, decades. This has been our goal, is to buy a house and to pay down the mortgage in a way that it lines up with you finishing work, which is why a lot of mortgages in the old days took you to 65. But now you can get mortgages, even residential mortgages, where you can borrow the money till you're 75, in part because the lenders realise that there are a lot of people out there that run their own businesses and won't stop at 65. Plus, of course, we've got the government endlessly moving our mortgage retirement age goal. So that's one thing there. If you are an investor, the reason you're investing in property is because you are focused on cash flow. So instead of paying down the debt because you're never going to live in this property, if you just repay the interest only, you actually have a smaller monthly payment. And that means that you've got a larger cash flow because the repayment on the mortgage is much smaller. The mortgage payment is a much smaller figure than for a capital and repayment mortgage. So now what we're doing is we're using leverage to make our money work harder. We're focused on interest-only mortgages because we're maximizing the cash flow. And the next thing to think about with your mortgage is, do you go fixed or variable? Now, when I first started out in property 20 years ago, prior to that, I had been a mortgage advisor or a mortgage administrator and then a mortgage manager. And what we were looking at then was periods where actually taking out a variable mortgage made sense because the interest rates were quite high and the expectation is that they would drop. So if you stayed on a variable rate, you would have been gradually dropping. But interest rates have been pretty much except for, a brief truss period and a brief flux around Brexit time, they've been basically very low, ridiculously abnormally low during COVID, which is not the norm. But interest rates have been around the 5%, give or take a little. Now, in a buy-to-let company mortgage, they will charge you a bit more, but we're basically talking about an average rate of 5% as a norm. And that means that you can consider now that a standard variable rate mortgage isn't going to do you any favors, but would potentially open you to risk. So if you think back before Liz Truss came in, we were looking at interest rates coming out of COVID at a very, very low rate. If you'd been on a variable rate, you would be down at that very low rate and you would be laughing. But you would have then easily shot up to 6 and 7% during the Truss period. And that wouldn't have been with any notice. That would have been things change in the market, the lenders change overnight, boom, your mortgage rate changes overnight. And if you weren't prepared for it, if you didn't have those contingencies, you would have been dramatically, dangerously shocked. So having a fixed rate does give you that consistency of knowing that your mortgage payment is always going to be 300 a month or 400 a month or whatever the figure is. You've got that knowledge. Now, the trick is to make sure that you are organised, aware of the market, and make sure that you're getting the best possible fixed rate. But again, that's one of the things that I do as standard working with my clients. There is even a bit more here in terms of money leverage. So not only you're leveraging your money through the loan to value, you're leveraging it by using interest only, you're making sure that you've got financial security by picking a fixed mortgage. And I would say you're saving on the rates by taking out a 5-year fixed rate mortgage because you're not paying the fees all over again. But you've also got compounding equity and cash flow through your property. So you've got to hold it for a minimum of 5 years because that's your 5-year fixed mortgage, maybe 10, maybe 15. And in that period, that equity that you have put in, that example, 25%, is going to grow because the property price will increase. Now, I can't tell you how much it's going to grow. And when I first started back in 2004, we were having a whale of a time and the property market was booming. When I then gave up my job and went into property full time in 2008, do you remember what we were doing then? We were having a global crisis and the market crashed. And absolutely none of the portfolio that I bought increased in value. And it didn't increase again for 7, 8, 9 years. But then it came back up and everything was fine. But over a long period of time, we live on an island, property prices increase. And so your equity in this brick bank is growing. You're not going to touch it because it's your deposit, plus it's the equity that has grown in terms of the house price going up. Alongside that, you've been getting your cash flow. But over a 5-year period, your cash flow will have been increasing. You will have been putting the rents up gradually, 5 to 10%, subject to market values over that period. So by the time you get out the other end, instead of having, let's say, £1,000 rent coming in, just to make the maths nice for me, you'd have 1,100, and then you'd have 1,000, if I keep it neat, 200, 300, 400, potentially even 500, subject to the market going up to that level, of course, because you can't ask for 1,500 if the market's still only at 1,200. It's about affordability and you'll lose your tenants. But alongside all of the ways that you can leverage your money through banks and through the financing, you've also got the property pulling its own weight, growing in capital value and growing in cash flow value. So that's an awesome way to leverage your money. And it's calm and it's steady, particularly if you invest in the family style buy to let. Now let's look at time leverage. So of course you can go out, you can watch the video, you can read books, you can do anything you like, learn about property and go out there and do it for yourself. Lots of people do. I think from the properties that I buy, I would very definitely say, don't be an uneducated accidental landlord. Don't be an uneducated attempt at a professional landlord. Get education, learn what you're doing. Whether you learn on the job, whether you learn through your letting agent, whether you learn through someone like me, you need to understand this business. Because while that leverage allows you to only put in £25,000 of your own money, which you could lose, you are taking on £75,000 worth of debt for which you are liable. So you do need to understand what you're getting into. But time leverage, if you then do it through, for example, sourcing, but equally through a letting agent, through bringing in builders. I meet so many people that want to do it all themselves. They want to self-manage because they're going to save 10% on the letting agent fee. I don't understand why, and I love my letting agent. I don't understand why they run letting agents, because earning 10% is just not worth the effort for me. I would want, because they've got all the overheads and everything else of the business, I would want to earn much more. So paying 10% for somebody else to get those calls, to handle those repairs, to be the one that goes and gets a key cut and lets the tenant in when they've locked themselves in, or fixes the broken handle or the dripping tap. That's where I want to leverage my time and let others do the legwork for me. But also what I would say is that a letting agent, particularly if you pick a good one, is up to date on the legislation, knows how to handle the tenants, and will provide you with an invaluable service. Not only the tenant finding and the tenant management, but actually finding the right tenant, making sure they are referenced correctly, make sure that all the legislation is taken care of, make sure that they are well managed, make sure that the property is monitored. I meet lots of people who have letting agents that they pay a fee for and the tenants aren't properly referenced. I frequently come across properties where we want to buy them with the tenant inside, but the tenant is, one property we bought, there was no gas certificate, there was no electrical certificate because the landlord self-managed and didn't do it properly. That is illegal. The fines are in excess of £6,000 for failing to have gas and electrical certificates. Another property we bought, they hadn't secured the deposits properly, so we had to give the deposits back, because if we continued to hold the deposits, then those tenants could sue us for 3 years of rent if they decided to take us to court. So there are real risks here if you don't understand the legislation and the responsibilities that you have, and therefore you can't pick the right letting agent to work for you. You also need a broker that understands you, your appetite for risk, and really understands property and what you're trying to do with these properties. And that's why having a broker that is also an investor, which is part of my team. So my letting agent, my broker, my accountant, and my insurers are all investors in property themselves. So they know the business that we are in. I think the only one that isn't is the solicitor. And that's because although I do have one solicitor I prefer to use, your solicitor is really dictated by the lender that you use. You don't always get a lot of choice. And a lot of people will say, oh, you need a solicitor on your team. No, you don't, because it's not up to you what solicitor you use. It's the solicitor that the lender determines that they want to use that makes a difference. Because when you take out that mortgage, the solicitor will be working for you, but they will also be working for the lender at the same time. And that's a lot better. And of course, as I've said, using me to source pre-vetted deals will save you a lot of time. And I have to say, I love walking around houses. It's almost like my version of Big Brother. It's my version of voyeurism, to go around these properties, to explore, to understand who's selling, why they're selling, who lived there, what problems they had, what works need doing, to find the things that people are trying to hide. 2 recent properties we went to last week, immaculately painted. One of them, a kitchen I would have quite happily had for myself. Another one, a bathroom I would have quite happily had for myself. But what they'd done is they painted over the damp. So the properties were fully damp. One, I could actually rub my hand on the wall and you could come away with sort of like where the paint was breaking off, this sort of powdery mold that was on there. Another one had got low level mold going on. And they've done all this work. And I then go in and I explore and I can see what they paid for the property. I can look at the property and see how much they've made. I know why they're asking the price they're asking, because they want to make a profit on. I know why they're asking the price that they've asked, because they want to make a profit on the property. But the bottom line is they have messed up completely. They've got all of their numbers wrong and they haven't done a good job. They haven't fixed the fundamentals. And therefore, it's nicely redecorated with a brand new kitchen, brand new bathroom, beautiful carpets throughout. And I'm going to have to gut the property because I'm going to have to take off 1 metre of the plaster in order to put in a damp-proof course. I'm going to have to seal the external walls. I'm going to have to open up the chimney to vet the chimneys because they've not been vented properly. Above all, when you leverage your time and you leverage your money, you have to stay the decision maker. So you've got to understand what's involved. And that's certainly one of the things that I look to do with all of my clients, is to help them get that level of education. And then I would say to you, there are a couple of other things. You want to be simple to start with, simple buy-to-lets. You can move your way on to more advanced strategies. Don't buy flats in the first place, but maybe look at buying blocks of flats in the future. Look at simple buy-to-let family houses now. Maybe you decide you want to do HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, or Airbnb in the future. But if you get that baseline in, it provides you with that financial resilience that you need. In the course, what I do is I take you through how to use a deal analyzer, understanding viewings, understanding the offer template, and getting your investor folder correct. But that's all if you actually decide you want to invest in property. You can see all of that on the video. And then here's a 90-day sprint for you if you're really serious about this. Number one, we would confirm your strategy through a call. We would then get you finance ready. We would then be in a position where I would start shopping for you, analysing offers, and then present them to you. Once we've got a property agreed and I've viewed it, I will prepare the refurbishment budget and make sure that's all lined up in order that when we complete, and I manage all that process for you as well, we're at a point where we can get the builders in if required. I will get you the offer accepted. I will get you the property completed. I will get that refurb completed and managed for you and put you in a position where you get a tenant that is paying rent. It is possible in 90 days. I would say a more realistic time is 90 to maybe 180 days, so 3 to 6 months. But if this is something that you're interested in, we can certainly book a call and look at how we can prioritize your transition plan to a life that you want, a life of your choosing. And let me take you back to the whole point of this idea of a work optional transition. I don't think that I would ever say to you, give up work, not just because, as I've mentioned, I want you to stay mortgageable, because that's great, but I will speak to people and they'll say, right, what I want to do is I want to give up work. And I'll go, well, how old are you? And they'll go, somewhere in their 40s, maybe even in their 50s. I want to give up work. And while I absolutely hear you, because I did fully retire myself from work at 48, it's boring. It's boring. You've been holding down a job. You've been doing something, let's still say it was 9 to 5, however many hours in the day that you do. Your life is busy. But more importantly, your brain is busy. You're thinking things, you're making decisions. You can't just cut that off in your 40s, even in your 50s. You will die of boredom. Or you'll have this plan to give up work and then you'll get miserable and then you'll go back and find yourself another job. And so what I want you to do is to think of a transition plan that takes you to a work optional position where, do you know what, if you had a second income, and I'm going to keep saying it's through property because obviously that's what I'm about. You've got this second property business that is generating income. You can start to make decisions obviously in conversation with your employer, where maybe you work a 4-day week, or maybe you work a 3-day week. Or maybe you leave company A and you go to company B and you take a step down the career ladder because it's a lot easier. That might be a bit difficult, but we'll see. Or maybe you do like one of my clients has done. He built his whole property portfolio and then he took a step completely to the side and has set up, oh my goodness, I think he's on his 3rd or 4th business now, that he is just having a whale of a time because he's taken all of that energy that he put into making somebody else's business great, his employers. He's put all of that into making businesses for himself. So he's got property businesses, he's got businesses with his brother, all sorts of things. And I'll get him back on to do an interview with us in the new year. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. But if you're then thinking to yourself, but if now work is optional because I've got this second income, what would I like to do with my, let's call it my work time? How would I like to spend my 9 to 5? Do I want to spend 5 days a week actually in some form of employment, whether it's my own business or whether it's somebody else's? Or have I always had a passion for a charity? Do I want to go and spend a couple of days a week working with a charity that really feeds my soul or helps me feel like I'm making a difference in the world, and I'll work a 3-day week on the side? You can have that choice, providing you follow these rules. So number 1, you would have your resilience rules. This is your emergency personal cash buffer. You'll have things like landlord insurance of the right sort to make sure that you're protected if anything goes wrong. You'll have all of the compliance taken care of through an expert letting agent. You'll have realistic maintenance allowances all put in there first. You'll also be in a position where you've got a buffer in your property business so that if a tenant does move out or refurbs are required, that's covered off. And you're going to be in a position where it's about the spreadsheet, it's about the numbers, and the emotions come second or third down the line because you have these rules that you are following. The second thing that you would do, particularly if you're going to work with me, is we would have quarterly and annual reviews. We would be looking at the rents, we would be looking at the costs, we would be looking at the yield that you're getting and the effort, we'd be looking at the property performance, making sure that it was still up to date. When we get to the point where we're 5 years down the line, we would be making considerations about, is this a property that you remortgage? Is this a property that you sell? Most of the time we keep them. Most of the time we're not drawing equity out unless we've been following a very specific cash purchase, refurb, remortgage afterwards, but that's a very specific strategy. We'd be looking at your mortgage timeline. We'd be looking at the next purchases and your readiness to make the next purchase. I literally had that call with a client this morning where we're planning when is her next purchase, and we're looking at the next 3 months she's going to be ready to go again. So we would do all of that reviewing constantly throughout your time working with me. And then what we would do is periodically we will come to a decision fork, let's say. Let's say that this is at a 5-year point. So you've been working with me 5 years, somewhere in the 5 to 10 year period, and you've got a number of properties in your portfolio. They're all the family buy-to-lets. And now what we want to do is think about, what should we do next? Now, for a majority of investors, they want to carry on with the family buy-to-lets. And maybe what they want to do is also, because they've got access to more funds, is they might then be in a position where they want to buy a small block of flats. So maybe a house that's been split into 2 flats, or a house that's been split into 3, that type of thing. And the reason for that is that we can just buy a bigger lump, a bigger building, but actually get greater, we're leveraging the bricks, if you like, this time, get greater rent out of that one brick building. Or What you might want to do after 5 to 10 years, when you're ready, is actually look at whether you want to take this business to the next level on your own. And maybe what you want is a house of multiple occupancy or something that is around Airbnb serviced accommodation. And that will all depend. In 5 years from now, we'll need to see where the government is in terms of taxes and in terms of what they've done to the property market, whether these strategies still make sense. I am more in favour of a block that's split into flats, because while there's upfront costs and there's upfront work, I'm still renting the property out to people that will stay there for the long term. An HMO is always going to have tenant turnover, and I'm going to have to furnish it, and I'm going to have to pay the utility bills. And serviced accommodation, goodness me, instead of moving on a monthly basis, serviced accommodation, they're going to be moving every 2 or 3 days. I'm going to have new people in. So now not only am I furnishing the property, marketing the property, constant, in a sense, mini tenant turnover, but I'm now got to pay the utility bills and become a cleaner. So they are not things that I'm fond of, and yet I do help my clients do them for various reasons that suit my client's strategy plan and my client's time availability and knowledge at that point. And of course, one of the things that we will do when the time is right is we will be looking at your refinance options. I mentioned that briefly. Do you remortgage and pull out some of your equity so that you can go again? Of course, that will reduce the cash flow on the property, because you'll increase the debt, you'll increase the mortgage payment, you'll obviously be reducing the cash flow. It could be that over 5 years, you've increased the cash flow to such a point that after 5 years, you can maintain your cash flow limit, and the remortgage costs are actually paid for by tenant rent increases. It might be that what we do is look at how we can develop or enhance certain properties. All of this, if it serves your plan. But that's the point. It's about reviewing, it's about evolving. That's the key thing here. And the other thing that I would say with this transition plan is it's about stopping you facing that cliff edge. It's about not going all the way to the end and then going, oh, I'm going to retire next year. And now what do I do? Because with 365 days left, it's too short. What you want to be doing is that transition plan, which might be phasing down hours. It might be changing how and where you work. It might be giving up employment and setting up a business on the side other than your property business. But all of that is something that you can put thought into from now, that you can become boss optional rather than this being a dramatic life event. So it's about thinking around your personal strategy. And if we were to have a call, what 3 questions would you have? What are your questions that will help you understand how you can create this transition plan? Now, we've talked about time, and I want to thank you for spending some of your precious time with me. You know how much I value you listening to this and supporting the podcast. And of course, if you haven't already done it, please make sure that you subscribe, rate, and review so that others can see the value. What I want to do is just condense everything that I've spoken about into my 3 wishes. These are the insights that I want to leave you with so that you've got a bit more whoosh into your life. Number 1, one income is 1 point of vulnerability. You can replace that financial vulnerability by creating some parallel cash flow. For my mind, leverage on money and time is much better put through property and buy-to-let properties at that, now while you're still employed, because it's easier to get a mortgage. And as I said, you're leveraging your time and your money to make them work harder so that you don't have to. Wish number 2 would be to know you're enough, more than enough, and much more than enough. Your financial freedom numbers, if you like. This is all part of that reevaluating where you are in your journey. You can start by aiming to create an income that will cover just one bill, and then your current way of life, and then of course your dream life. And you can do this step by step. But if you don't monitor your income and expenses, this is going to be a hard task. So this is where you need to be getting out that spreadsheet and making sure that you understand what's coming into your life financially and where it's going when it leaves you. If you know your numbers, then we can create a plan to grow you a property business that will provide you with more options than you have right now. And wish number 3 is this leveraging time and money, and the idea that it's a transition. It's not a bungee jump. It's not a parachute jump without the parachute. By using mortgages, by using professionals, all of those that I've mentioned, from brokers to letting agent, and of course my sourcing and mentoring services, you can buy back hours. Effectively, that's what you're doing. By creating this cash flow alongside your job, you are creating money that allows you to buy back your time so that you can move forward in whatever your transition plan is to becoming boss optional whenever you're ready. So many people just retire and then plan. And actually, the best plan that you can make is the plan that you made last year. And if you didn't make a plan with me last year, you need to start today. I just want to recap these points of the REACT model. So If you choose to listen to the YouTube video in more detail, to take this the next step, will go through reevaluating your current financial situation, exploring what the possibilities are to make your money work harder so you don't have to. What approach will you use? What are the investment techniques that you can find that you're comfortable with, that fit your lifestyle now, the lifestyle that you want to have, and of course, your risk tolerance. And then to actually make a choice, that informed decision, so that you can go ahead and start creating this second income and turn that all important theory into action, which is crucial, because otherwise it just becomes a bit more of that shelf development. It's just something that you heard that you took no action on. While your salary is useful and very useful in terms of getting you a mortgage, dependence on a salary alone is risky. It leaves you vulnerable to an employer who, frankly, is focused on their business success, and so they should be, but they're not focused on your lifestyle. Only you can do that. Property investment can give you the options that you want, can build in just simply greater financial resilience. Carry on doing this job if you love what you're doing. Carry on with your career if you've invested time, money, and energy into becoming trained as a lawyer, as an accountant, as a doctor, or anything else. But have a second source of income that will give you greater financial resilience than you have now. So whatever changes come down the line, you are in a position where it's not going to affect you deeply and painfully like a lot of these changes do affect people. Number one, start by monitoring your money on a monthly basis, your income and your expenses if you haven't done that already. Let's get to a point where we understand what your freedom number will be. What is the amount of money that you need to cover your essential overheads, those basic costs? And then we can choose a clear investment strategy to help you make that first step to your work optional transition. And of course, if it turns out that property isn't your thing and you're curious about investing in all sorts of other things, I have plenty of contacts, people that I can divert you to once we've had that all important call. So if you want experienced eyes and pre-vetted deals, of course, I can help you. If you want me to mentor you through the process, of course, I can help you. All you have to do is follow the link so that you can take the Readiness to Retire Wealthy audit, so that we've got some numbers there for you and some idea of what position you're in, and book that strategy call. And because this is launch week for the course, please do watch that free 2-hour YouTube video. It's called Escape the 9 to 5 Through Property. And there will be more work that I will be doing on this topic planned for 2026. So we can work alongside one another. I can help you create your plan as I grow my thinking around this with the coming advent of AI, of course. My name is Vicki Wusche. I hope you have found this podcast both useful, informative, thought-provoking. Please remember to subscribe, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much for listening.